Hey, good evening, everybody. Tim Walsh coming to you live from the Fire Service Institute of Illinois here on the campus of the University of Illinois, where today we'll be talking about grain bin rescue and agricultural accidents with Dave Newcomb and Bill Fulton. So join us. Get signed in. We're going to post the handout for today's episode so that you can follow along and use this in your training later today or tomorrow. We're welcoming you at a new time. It's 6 o'clock Central Time here in Illinois, so we got the sun setting behind us so that our farming brothers and sisters can join us and hopefully learn something. So let us know where you're watching from. Sound off in the comments section, and we're going to let you get signed in. Hey, good evening, everybody. Tim Walsh coming to you live from the campus of the Fire Service Institute of Illinois, where we're going to be talking about grain bin rescue for the next 45 minutes. Last year, there was an extremely wet harvest, which caused at least 35 bona fide grain bin rescues in this country. And we're lucky here at the Institute that we have partners that support agricultural rescue, and we have two great instructors for you today that are going to deliver this program in 45 minutes. So we're going to cover all the highlights and some of the lowlights, but this is a real class that you can take here from us that's funded by our partners. We've lowered the cost so that we can get real training to rural fire departments across the state of Illinois and wherever you want it delivered. So today I'm going to be joined by Dave Newcomb and Bill Fulton, two of our top shelf instructors in the agricultural rescue program, and I'm going to turn it over to them now. Please let us know where you're watching from. The handout for today's follow along is already in the comments section. Go ahead and print that. Sit down if you're eating your dinner in the firehouse now, or you're at home, and grab a cup of coffee and something to drink and spend 45 minutes with us. So we're going to get started. Dave, Bill.
Good evening, I'm Dave Newcomb. I'm the Ag Rescue Program Manager here at the Fire Service Institute. I've worked for the Institute for about 23 years. I've retired from the city of Urbana. I had 35 years active duty in the fire service and been retired for about 9 years. The last 11 years I've been the Program Manager for the Ag Rescue Program. It's blossomed. We're doing a lot of good things. And my partner Bill Fulton is with us today.
Hi, I'm Bill Fulton. Glad to have you all with us tonight. I've been with the Salem Fire Protection District for about 24 years. I'm the district fire marshal down there. I've been with the Institute for about 14 years, teaching primarily in the ag rescue side of things. I have a background in agriculture. I've either lived or worked on a farm all my life. So this is very important to me because, for one thing, some of the time when we get a call like this, it could be a relative or a good friend.
Okay, just so you understand, like Tim said, we average about 35 engulfments in the United States every year. Half of those are not successful rescues, and they are all age groups, anywhere from 18 years old, teenagers, all the way up into people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. People might ask, why would you even go in a grain bin? Well, it's important to understand that that's their income. That grain bin is full of grain that can be their collateral for a loan and or their income. There could be $500,000 to $1 million in that bin. So it's very critical to them. So they want to go in there and make sure the quality is good. So that's why people get in bins. Another time to get in is when the unloading process, and we'll talk about that a little bit more too. but people get in trouble when the grain stops flowing and they climb in the bin to unstop it, and that's where they get in trouble. We know, once again, about those. About 60% of the people who die in grain bins every year in the United States are people trying to save someone else. 7 out of 10 happen on the family farm. Would not be uncommon to have mom, dad, brother, uncle, cousin, and sister in there trying to find a loved one when we're trying to perform a rescue. So, once again, 60% of would-be rescuers, 50% of those happen while we're on the scene, and 90% are due to bad air quality. So, as a first responder, as I'm in the truck, I get the call and I'm en route, some of the considerations I want to, oh, I'm sorry, we're jumping past pre-planning. Bill, I'm sorry, I jumped in there.
That's all right. As far as pre-planning, you got to remember this is a very labor-intensive operation. This rescue could see as many as 50 to 100 commonly on the scene. The other thing too is it's a time-consuming operation. 4 to 6 hours is the average time. So we have to pre-plan for these incidents. We have to look at who our mutual aid companies are coming in, because we're not going to get all those people just from our own local fire district or local fire department. We've got to see what their capabilities are, what kind of things they have available that we can use as far as tools and that kind of thing. We have to look at the timing of getting a technical rescue team there. It could be a possibility that we would need them, and we need to call them early and call them as to get them there and get them on the road so that they're of assistance to us. The other thing that we need to look at is the availability of maybe putting this into our Mavis box system as a grain bin call. It's the only good way to get that dispatching done in a timely fashion. We've done that down in my fire district. I've seen it done in some other fire districts across the state. Get the right people there in a timely fashion is one of the most important things, and that's part of the pre-planning operation. Dave?
So, some of the considerations we want to be thinking about while we're en route to the scene, okay? The number and location of patients. I'm responding to a scene. Do I have one grain bin there? Do I have multiple grain bins? And do I have just one patient in the bin, or are there two? Many of us know farmers out there that might have a grandson or a granddaughter with them that are there with them all the time. And if grandpa's in the bin, pretty good bet the grandson or granddaughter might be with them. So we've got to try to identify how many patients we're dealing with. We want to, above all, upon arrival, one of our first consideration would be looking at lockout, tagout. We want to stabilize the scene, and we want to make sure that we stop all of any mechanisms that can make the grain move. So we're going to transition over here to the prop. We're going to go through lockout, tagout real quick. Just a fast demonstration. As you can see here, we've got an electrical panel that would not be uncommon in a farm, but as you can see, things are labeled for different components. But we see we have a lock and a tag, and what that is it positively locks the power source out that machine can't get turned back on. It's amazing that this little action right here can save lives, because how common would it be for us in the farming community to come by there, somebody's unloading grain, and somebody says, hey, they had to get in a bin and make a repair, and somebody says, hey, we're supposed to be unlocking, unloading, and they start flipping switches on, turn machinery on while somebody's inside with their hands. So lockout, tagout is so basic. It can be done on the farm, it can be done at home, it can be done anywhere, anytime you're dealing with machinery or anything that happens. It can be as simple as I unplug a drill or something if I change the bit. Now I know that means that it's an old-time drill that has a cord. Okay, I'm dating myself, I get that. But lockout, tagout saves lives across the board. So once again, that would be a first consideration. Once I've identified where this can be done while I'm identifying where my patients are, because I want to be specific to the bin that they're in. That would be our thing. The next thing is once I've identified where the patient is in the bin, I'm going to put someone up at the top to look inside to locate the patient. Also, I want to take some air quality sampling right there at the entrance to start getting an idea. Most of the time when people are in the bin, it's sometimes when the grain goes out of condition, it can be spoiled, which means we could have things that can be replacing oxygen. It could be a low environment. So we want to be cautious of that, but we need to start, even as a basic responder, lockout, tagout, and starting the air monitoring. If I've got a technical rescue team coming in, that even saves them more time. Okay, so as we're doing that, we want to do that. We're going to then determine if the patient is either partially submerged, or totally submerged. Now, if they're totally submerged, one of the first things we want to do is turn on the air, get air moving through the bin. If they're under the grain and have the capability to breathe, we're going to pump them air. The next part is we're going to cut the bin. Now, cutting the bin, what we're going to do is just like you're drowning. We're cutting it to uncover you and get you below the surface. Okay, so that's critical. And then above all, as we're setting up, we'll be moving on to get our trained responders and that. So once we've made the holes and got everything uncovered, we're going to be moving into that. So with that, so that's somebody totally under the bin. So we're going to move now to a cutting operation. So it's going to take us a minute here to get a couple things set up. So Tim, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Dave, and we'd like to thank some of our partners that provide training for rescuers all across the state of Illinois. Turtle Plastics, Industrial Scientific, Illinois Farm Bureau, Illinois Farm Credit, and there are others that we'll thank later in the show. But with your help, we can provide more training to rural firefighters who predominantly protect America, volunteers all across this country, and the majority of the firefighters in Illinois are volunteers. So I'm going to turn it back over to Bill and his team, and we're going to demonstrate how to make a cut right now with the K12 saw. Come on in, guys. While they're getting set up and we're getting the saw fired up, as soon as that saw fires up, you're not going to be able to hear us talk, but Bill's going to go over some safety considerations before we fire that saw. Wait 1 second, please, Keith. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, when we make the cut on a grain bin, one of the most important things that we have to understand is that we make that cut in two simultaneous cuts, one on one side of the bin, one right across from the other cut. It has to do with the structural integrity of that particular bin. If we would only cut one side, we could either cause that bin to tip over, or we could cause it to actually, the grain cause the weight of the bin, or the weight of the grain, I'm sorry, to crinkle the bin on the other side. Both being a problem as far as both for the person that's trapped inside and also for the responders who are on the scene. We make a V cut. We'll show you how to make that V cut. That V cut is actually going to be, we're going to cut one side, we'll cut the other side, then we'll cut the bottom last. The reason we cut the bottom last is because there's going to be two cuts being made at the same time. If there was an issue with that equipment on one side or the other, we'd stop that operation until we got that equipment going, because we want that grain to flow out evenly across and out of the bin. We don't want to put pressure on one side of the bin or the other. You're going to see that there's going to be two people in this team. There's going to be one running the saw. There's going to be one with their hand on the person's shoulder. The one with their hand on the person's shoulder is kind of the safety person. He's going to be kind of watching the operations officer off to the side, making sure that we can go ahead and complete that cut. They're going to be looking around, looking for things above and all kinds of things, because that one person making that cut has to concentrate on the cut itself. So I'm going to call my guys in. They're going to start the saw. They're going to go ahead, like I say, make one cut this way, one cut this way, and then finish it off at the bottom. If this bin was full of grain, normally that would just pop right out. If you find that it doesn't pop right out, you can take a Halligan tool or something like that and actually open it up and bend it out. But for this particular purpose, we don't have grain in the bin, so it won't do it. But we're going to, like I say, always make that V cut. Okay, come on in, guys. this pops open. Now, the thing you have to realize is this can still be used as a valve. This can still be used to shut the flow off if for some reason we're moving too much grain too quickly and we find the victim sliding or something. So we can push it in and hold it. The other thing that we don't do is we don't make a true V, if you will. We make a flat bottom V. The reason we found that that works much better is because we can, for instance, if we put them in a Stokes basket or even just on a backboard, we found that the flow of grain coming out, if we actually use this hole to remove them, that comes right out. If we have a true V, that Stokes basket tries to fall into that true V, or it tries to, so does the backboard. It just constantly fighting that. So this kind of makes a flat area that we can scoot them right out. When we get ready to use this hole as a place to remove the victim, if that's what we choose to do, we'll cut this right off the top here because we no longer need that valve. And that pretty much can sums up what we do. The main thing here is, remember, always 2 simultaneous cuts.
Spotter.
And yeah, and as far apart as you can make them, we never cross a bolt pattern because that again goes into the instructional integrity of the bin. So we don't cross any of the struts. So because again, all into the instructional integrity of the bin.
Hey, Bill, we had a question come in that
Sure.
I'd like you to answer. They're asking us across the country now, where on the height of the grain bin would be a proper place to make that cut to get the most benefit and make it one cut, or do you have to make multiple cuts?
It is a possibility you'd have to make multiple cuts. It all has to do with where your victim is in the bin. If you find that the victim is in the top of the bin and the bin is fairly full, then if you've got a ladder, an aerial device or something, you can make that cut off of an aerial platform. You can go rather high because you don't want to have to remove 40,000 bushel of grain when it's not necessary. But if we know that the victim is fairly low in the bin, down low, the whole idea of cutting this bin is to get that grain out of the bin, so we want to go as low as possible. So, I mean, it all is dependent on where your victim is located and how much grain you have to do to remove to get him out of there.
Okay, and then one other question we had
Sure.
is, obviously we already did the lockout tag out before we made the cut.
Right.
So we didn't want to have any issues with the victim inside the grain bin. But the other question that I had is, when do we start the monitoring process with the 5-gas monitor for this type of rescue?
Oh, as soon as with the person that goes up to see where the victim's placement is, can take a monitor with them, and we start that right then.
Great.
Because it could be that that victim is just down on the surface of the bin, and again, as Dave said in the beginning of the program, it could be that it's a bad air quality situation rather than actually a true entrapment. Yes, they're caught in the bin, but they're down because of either low oxygen or a bad air situation or something.
Dave, would you talk about, or Bill, would you talk about this Ventus Pro
Sure.
monitor from
Sure.
Industrial Scientific, please,
Sure.
for us for a minute?
What we would do with the 5-gas monitor, we would just drop it in there, get a reading. We're looking basically for the level of oxygen or for any explosive gases that could be in there or any nitrous oxide, that kind of thing. Real super, handheld monitor. You can also get a reading out. The command staff can get a reading from this particular monitor. Just a real nice, handy little monitor to have. If you've got maybe a bigger situation, we've got they also offer another monitor here that's can be set up and left remotely.
Yeah, so this is a radius monitor from Industrial Scientific, and there are different monitoring companies out there, but Industrial Scientific is a huge partner with the Illinois Fire Service Institute, and they give us monitors to teach all across the state with and in national programs, so we wanted to recognize their dedication to the program today. Thanks for covering that for me, Bill. I appreciate it. Hey, Dave, where are we moving to next? What are we going to talk about
I think
next?
we're going to move now to the partially submerged. I want to add one more thing about cutting the bin, and is the bins of today can be up to 100 feet in diameter. So if I'm cutting it on the east side, I don't know what's going on the west side. So what we want to do is put a person out in an area who can see both teams working, and you would predetermine a set of hand signals so that you're working to cut the bin in a simultaneous motion. So if, say, somebody breaks a blade or something, then we can stop the team on the other side until they get caught back up. So it's a critical issue because, once again, bins of today on the family farm are being built. They're 60 feet in diameter. being built on the family farm. So with that, we're going to transition into the patient who is partially submerged. And so for that, we also want to touch base on when the people are making entry into the bin. Their operations for us, with the OSHA standard, we suggest that you be at least at the operations level of training. The other thing is in grain bin rescues, we're going to use rope rescue, we're going to use confined space rescue techniques, and trench rescue. All three of those disciplines play into the partially submerged patient. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill here, and he's going to run the operation while we go perform a rescue. So thank you.
Okay, while Bill and his team are getting set up, come on in, guys. I'm going to talk to you a few more minutes, not even a few more minutes, a few more seconds about some other partners that are dedicated to this program. Go ahead, guys. You can walk past me and get set up. So Warren Henderson Farm Bureau, Paratech, Country Financial, obviously Brock Grain Systems, and Ag Reliant Genetics, who just offered a grain bin prop for us in the Kankakee area and sign an agreement with the university so that we can teach grain bin rescue there too. So these are classes that we offer that are grant funded here at the university for firefighters, both paid professional and volunteers who serve in the majority of the state of Illinois. So we want you to sign up for these classes. These are OSFM state certifications through the State Fire Marshal's Office with actual testing, and the majority of the class is hands-on. We get tools in your hands and we show you the latest tools and techniques to make grain bin rescues so that you can have an impact in your community where you work and where you respond. So we got 2 more people to get up in there and then we'll get started. I'm going to have my camera person move to a high vantage point so that you can see what's going on inside that tube that's open for us. And we're going to get Juno lines on everybody just like we normally would at a real grain bin rescue. So as we transition over, just stick with us here for about 30 more seconds and Bill will start talking about the rescue that we're going to make now. Hang on, guys. Hang on, guys. Before we start that auger, let's let Bill talk about it.
The first thing we're going to do if we've got someone that's partially submerged is we're going to assess. Now we've had to go a little bit because of the time constraints. We've had to go a little bit ahead of time and put some things in here. But we're going to assess their mental and physical condition, because sometimes it's just simply something as like a diabetic issue or a heart condition or something like that. Okay. We're going to see how engulfed they are, and if it's possible where they're partially submerged, what we're going to do is set up a rescue tube. Now when we set up that rescue tube, the first sheet goes in front of their face, because that way no more grain will get down to their face, down to their chest, and that kind of thing. Then we'll build the tube on around the victim, and this encapsulates the victim where we can start removing that grain from around the victim. If we try to pull that victim out without removing that grain, there can, especially just even if they're just at waist level, there could be 600 pounds of force on that particular patient from that grain. We just can't do that. You've got to get a grain tube around them. You've got to get it in place, and then we start taking the grain out with the auger. Okay, guys, go ahead and start taking that grain out. As the grain comes out, we'll keep pushing the tube down, getting it further and further down around the victim. We'll even move the auger around to take grain from behind the chest, or from behind the rib cage and that kind of thing. You can do that. Okay, move it again, guys.
Pulling forward?
Yeah, pulling forward a little bit, move him around just a little bit. Get it behind there. By removing the grain from behind his rib cage, it actually allows him to breathe better because that grain is putting pressure on his rib cage and not allowing his lungs to completely fill. Go ahead. Now turn it where, yeah, there you go. Very good. There you go. Very good. The rescue auger moves about 5 bushel a minute. So it takes approximately somewhere around 5 to 7 minutes if we were emptying out this tube. As soon as we see that their legs are clear enough and it's pretty much below their knees, then we can pull the grain auger out. Go ahead and stop, pull the auger out. We'll set it to the side. Okay, just set it over on the edge. Okay, then we'll get a hold.
Ready?
Okay. We'll pull the victim up. All right. Get him up on the tube.
Ready?
Yep.
1, 2, 3.
Very good. Okay, good job, guys. Okay. Okay.
All right, so Bill, I want you to cover a couple more things for
Okay,
me. We have a couple questions. Let's talk about the high point anchor and how that actually is going to work at a real farm. Obviously, we have a prop here, and we built this so the high point anchor was already there. But
Right.
let's talk about how that works at the real farm.
At a real farm, it could be that we'd want to get an aerial device in there and use it as a high point anchor. It could be that we find some sort of a in some of the grain bins we have like I-beam and that kind of thing that we can use for a high point anchor, but something outside the bin is what we're actually looking for. We're not going to be able to. It's not going to be something right in the center of the bin normally. It's not going to be that way. So usually, like I say, we'll use an aerial device. We'll use something right outside the access hole on the top of the bin.
Okay, and then let's talk about one other thing.
Sure.
In this rescue, we use the Great Wall.
Right.
Now, there are multiple tubes out
Absolutely.
there. There's the Liberty Rescue Tube. There's the Great Wall. Turtle Plastics has their own, where
Right.
they actually offer a rebate to rescuers all across the country if they buy that one, a $500 rebate for every tube that they buy. Let's talk about a few of the props, or not actually real rescue devices, used to make this rescue.
Right. You know, every one of them, we make successful rescues. That is not an issue. They all have their pluses and minuses. It just depends on what your local fire district, your local farm bureau, your local elevators, whoever would want to support that. You know, GSI makes a tube, KC Equipment makes a tube, they make the Great Wall. It's all dependent on the need in your area and what is available, and again, what kind of discounts. I mean, if there's a big discount, that plays into everybody's budget.
And then let's talk about the individual PPE that the rescuers changed to. When they first cut that tube for a fully submerged victim, they had their regular structural firefighting clothes on. And now they're wearing something different. Let's talk about the setup that they're wearing now and why that's important.
It's important that they have on, as a day like today, with a heat index, I would assume over 100 degrees. They've got to be comfortable in there, because if it's 100 degrees outside, it's 140 degrees in that bin. So they can, as long as they've got the proper harness on, have the proper fall protection and all that kind of thing, they need to have their helmet, they need to have eye protection, they need to have, possibly in a bin, you might need ear protection, gloves, and steel-toed boots. That's the main thing. When we get into the winter months and so forth, then you start looking at layering up.
Okay, and then one other question that came up. Can you talk to me, especially because I'm a city fireman, and I never been to a grain rescue, but talk about dust and how dust affects the rescue and how you go to work with dust.
I think Dave covered it. When we have a totally submerged victim, we'll turn on the fans on the vent fans for the bin, and we'll blow air in there, force air in there, because air moves through grain. We'll get that victim as much air as possible. when we've got one that's partially submerged, we sometimes don't want to do that, both for the victim's sake and also for the first responder's sake, because that stirs up a lot of the grain dust that's in that bin, and the grain dust can be rather explosive. It can, basically what they say is, if OSHA says if I'm 5 foot from you and I can't see you, we've got an explosive situation with grain dust that's more, more explosive than TNT. It can actually blow the top of a bin off if there's a spark.
So for a guy like me that's never been in a grain bin at a real rescue,
Yeah.
how, obviously that's not going to show up on my 5-gas monitor,
No,
right?
absolutely
So it's not
not.
a lower explosive limit
It's a
option.
visual thing.
It's a visual thing. So it's it's the 6th test that you would have to perform.
Absolutely.
Besides the 5-gas monitor,
Yes.
the dust is the 6th test.
Right.
Okay, great. Let's get Dave back in here. And fellas, I would like you to review what we covered today. I want you to hit the highlights. And let's talk to some of the farmers out there too. What are some steps that they can do on the family farm to make sure this doesn't happen to someone in their family? And then let's talk about what we talked about today.
You want me to cover the family farm? You want
You do the family farm.
All right. Guys, do not go in a grain bin unless you've got somebody with you up on the top watching you. I don't know how many times my brother farmed, I farmed, and we've gone into a bin all by ourselves, and it could have been an issue, and we were just lucky. Have somebody there that if you do get into an issue, they can call 911 and get the proper people headed that way. Don't waste time trying to dig those people out. Get help. It is a labor-intensive rescue. You're not going to be able to do it by yourself. Call and get, that's what the fire service is there for. That's what the rescue people and first responders are there for. Get them headed your way. Wear a tagline. There's companies who actually just give them to the local farmers. So wear that tagline so that if, it'll help you, it'll keep you where you can get over to that ladder and get out. And if it doesn't work out and you do get caught, at least we've got a way to find you quickly. Dave, you want to cover?
Once again, exactly. We got to break the culture of working alone. We got to break the culture of going in the bin, especially, first and foremost, turn the equipment off that can make the grain move. Lock out, tag out. That's why we preach this very hard. That $3 padlock can be the difference between life and death. Now, we talked about observations a minute ago. We do the 5-gas monitor and all that. We're looking for dust. The other thing that a responder wants to look at is what's called the angle of repose. You can see here, the grain would be normally unloading in the bin, and this is the angle that good quality grain would shape in the bin. If that grain was way up here like this, you're in an entrapment scenario that can bury the rescuers. You're in an issue that could be bad. The grain is out of condition. It won't flow normally. You could also have a whole lot more environmental issues there because that grain is giving off hydrogen sulfide and a whole host of other things that are oxygen replacements. That's why we said 90%. We want to, for first responders and farmers, it's that urge that I've got to go save them. I got to go save my son, my brother, my whoever. I've got to call 911 and get help on the way. For that first responder, I argue this every time I'm in a class. So I just got to sit there and watch them die. No. Look, if you can do lockout, tag out, and if you can do locating the patient and start ventilation and get a line on them, you've just got the first 4 steps a technical rescue team doesn't have to think about. You saved them 40 minutes at least. So it's going to be a whole lot of different levels of expertise. We all have to work together. And I would urge all you first responders, you fire chiefs and that, if you have a technical rescue team in your district or wherever, do you know who your team leader is? Get him on a first name basis, have him come out to the department, look at your assets, look at what they have, how you blend together, how you work together, because I don't want to meet in the middle of an old crap, okay? So, with that.
So a couple more things right before you guys close out and you go over the highlights that we covered today. One of the questions that we had that I'm going to need you guys to answer is, what's the pressure on the side of a grain bin when we cut into it? Are we increasing the pressure, or are we just releasing the pressure when that cut's made because the grain starts to flow? That would be the first question. So probably I would think, just from what I know, we're releasing the pressure. Releasing the pressure.
There's
and as long as we make a proper cut like you guys talked about, there shouldn't be an issue.
That's right.
Now, Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, as far as what we're talking about, as far as making simultaneous cuts on both sides of the bend, the only way that you would put pressure, unequal pressure on it, is to leave the weight of that grain. As you know, it's going to start moving out at an angle. It's going to change. It's try to find this angle of repose. So what it's going to do is it's going to leave all that weight on the other side of that bend. So this is where we would get into a collapse situation. If it puts all that pressure on the other side of that bend, it's going to start moving that, putting all that pressure and weight on that side. So if we equalize that by making simultaneous cuts, whether it's 2, 4, 6, 8, depending on the size of the bend, the only thing we don't want to see probably is you cutting every sheet around the bend. We'd like to see you skip a sheet as we're going around. But that's going to take that pressure off. It's going to release the pressure of the grain. The grain's going to flow out, and we're going to hopefully take that pressure off. And here's the thing about having that grain flow out too, as far as pressure off the victim, because when that victim is down in that cone, all that pressure of that grain is on the victim. It's also on the grain rescue tube if we try to put it around them. So if we take that grain and we drop it down and we put them on top of that, we invert that cone and put them on top of it, every time that they move more grain away from them. It takes pressure off their body. Likewise, when we start pushing that tube into the grain, it pushes grain away from them. They don't have that pressure on them.
Okay, great. And then a couple of questions that I'm just going to answer real quick for you. We had a question about monitoring for hydrogen sulfide. Yes, we want to monitor for hydrogen sulfide. That's one of the 5 gases we monitor for with that 5-gas monitor when we place our rescuers inside the grain bin. So that has to get done. Mike Mayton asked a question about grants that are available to rescuers. The only one that I know of for sure right now is Turtle Plastics out of Lorain, Ohio. They're one of the partners here at the University of Illinois. They're actually sponsoring classes for us and lowering the cost for rescuers all across the state that can attend these classes. And then the last question that we had was, I think we got them. I think we covered them all. So guys, just hit the high points of what we covered today, and then I think we'll wrap up, and I think we're about done.
Could I come back to the hydrogen sulfide real quick?
You please could.
Okay, the reason that we monitor for hydrogen sulfide, where does that come from? It comes from organic material that breaks down. What happens when grain goes out of condition? It becomes organic material breaking down, and that's where we get into the hydrogen sulfide issue. Okay. Dave, you want to cover some of the high points?
First and foremost, grain bin incidents are low frequency but high risk. They don't happen very often. Some people in their whole career never have one. Other people have had multiple incidents, but it can be one of the most dangerous positions we can put our rescuers in, because grain works just like a fluid and it can be real dangerous. We have to fight that urge to jump in and save a life. There are techniques and that have to be followed so that everybody goes home. That's our critical point. Set up the equipment, get the expertise you need there. And one of the other folks, another resource for you that is huge, is even if it's on the family farm, call the local grain elevator. Those guys move more grain in an hour than I can move all day. They are an excellent, huge resource that help you. If you're going to cut a bin and move 20,000 bushels, they know how to do it, and they have the equipment to do it. A huge resource. So get your first responders in there. We're going to have fire, we're going to have police, EMS, the whole 9 yards. But another resource that's very critical is your local elevator guys. And for the farmers, they know you and you know them. And they are a huge resource because they can also help you if you have a bin that you're having a condition problem with. They have techniques and all that if you had a bad grain in it, they can help you with taking care of that. So it's a huge resource.
So we had a couple of last questions. One was, is there ever a time when you would need to wear your SCBA in the grain bin? Now the grain bin is a confined space, and we covered that earlier in today's program. So if you can't get proper air quality inside the bin, you can't put rescuers in there. So you're either going to have to go to a supplied air system or an SCBA with the ability to change out and switch rescuers out before they go on belts. And then the other question we had was ground pads in the bin. Now you could see, if you backed up in the video, that we did have ground pads in the bin, and we were using old bread containers, correct guys? Where they deliver the bread? Coca-Cola 1, 2 liter bottle containers,
yeah.
The plastic ones that you could get from your local grocery store, and you could put those in there for the rescuers to stand on. So I'd like to thank Bill and Dave for a really great topic here today. We've been with you guys for about 45 minutes. Please reach out to our webpage at www.fsi.illinois.edu for upcoming training. We'll be back with you in 2 weeks for trench rescue, and 2 weeks after that, we'll be talking about rapid intervention teams on the fire ground, how to make rescues of firefighters in your local area. Remember, today's teaching points are online in the comments section. If you still have other questions after we sign off here, we'll answer those questions later, and I'll get my 2 experts to handle them because I've never been to a grain rescue. There's classes coming up later this fall. We'll be back teaching live again all across the state. Look on our website for those classes. They're grant funded, and we'd love to get you in. So we appreciate you joining us here at the Illinois Fire Service Institute on the campus of the University of Illinois, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Take care of each other.